In the morning, well before the normal visiting hour, a lady wearing an elegant checked cloak fluttered out of an orange painted wooden house that boasted a mezzanine and sky blue columns. A footman followed her in greatcoat with triple collar and round, glossy cap with gold braid on it. Leaving the house, the lady immediately fluttered up the lowered steps of a waiting carriage. The footman shut the carriage door behind her, pulled up its steps, took hold of the straps at the back, and shouted, "Go!" to the coachman. The lady had just heard a piece of news and felt an insurmountable impulse to communicate it to someone else. She kept peeking out of the carriage, disappointed each time to find that more than half the distance remained. Each house seemed to her longer than it should be, especially the white, stone, narrow-windowed poorhouse, which stretched out for such an unbearably long time that she couldn't help muttering, "The stupid building, it'll never end." And she grumbled at her coachman twice. "Come on, get a move on, Andre. You're unbearably slow today." Finally, she reached her destination. The carriage stopped in front of a one-story gray wooden house with little white carvings above the windows and a tall wooden trellis fence right before them, enclosing a narrow garden with rickety trees, pale under the ever-present dust of the town. There were flower pots in the windows, a parrot swinging in his cage holding onto a ring with his beak, and two lapdogs stretched out asleep in the sun. Here lived a close friend of the lady in the carriage. Now, I wonder what to call the two ladies without arousing anger, as has happened to me before. It is dangerous to invent some name for them. Whatever name I might pick, there's sure to be someone in some corner of our vast land who bears that name, and he'll become furious and declare that I've been snooping around, spying on everyone, and have discovered who he is, what sort of coat he wears, which lady he sees, and what's his favorite dish. And it is much more dangerous to mention his position and rank. Nowadays, persons in all high positions are terribly touchy, and are convinced that every fictional character is a living person. Such seems to be the general state of mind. It's enough to say there's a stupid person in such and such a town, and you've already stepped on someone's dignity. A respectable-looking gentleman will jump up shouting something about his being a person, too, and since he lives in that particular town, is he, by any chance, being called stupid, too? In short, he'll have immediately divined the author's intentions. Therefore, to avoid misunderstanding, we'll refer to the lady whom the lady in the carriage had come to see as the Lady Delightful in every respect, which was the almost unanimous consensus of the town. She had earned this appellation legitimately, for she never spared herself in trying to be altogether amiable, although, to tell the truth, my God, what a wily feminine temperament was detectable under that amiability. And at times, my God, what a sharp pin was concealed beneath everything she said. And heaven only knows what feelings stirred in her toward a woman who bested her in anything. But it was all veiled under manners as refined as any to be found in a provincial town. Every movement was a display of good taste. She even liked poetry, and knew how to give a pensive tilt to her head when the proper occasion presented itself. Thus, all were agreed. She was a lady delightful in every respect. The other lady, i.e., the one in the carriage, was not quite so complex, and we shall therefore refer to her simply as the pleasant lady. The arrival of the visitor woke the lapdogs sleeping in the sun, the fluffy Adele, who kept entangling herself in her own long hair, and the spindle-legged Potpourri. Barking and carrying their curled tails high, they darted into the entrance hall where the visitor had removed her cloak, revealing a berry-boned dress of fashionable design and color. A fragrance of jasmine spread through the room. As soon as the Lady Delightful in every respect was informed of the arrival of the pleasant lady, She hurried out to meet her. The ladies clutched each other's hands, kissed, exclaimed like two young girls meeting not too long after graduation from boarding school, before their mamas have had time to make it clear to them that their papas aren't equals in wealth and standing. Their kisses were of the resounding sort, and this set the dogs barking again, for which they were flicked with a kerchief. The ladies then moved into the drawing room, the blue one with a sofa, a little oval table, and even little screens with clinging ivy, where they were followed by the fluffy Adele and the spindle-legged potpourri. "Here, do sit here in this cozy little corner," the hostess said, installing the visitor in a corner of the sofa. "Take this pillow, dear. There, this way." She stuffed behind her guest's back a cushion with a knight embroidered on it, just like all knights that are embroidered on canvas. The nose looked very much like a ladder, and the lips a square. "I'm so pleased it's you. I heard someone driving up, and I wondered who it could be at this early hour. Then my parasha comes and tells me it's the vice-governor's wife. Good heavens, that bore again, I said to myself, and was going to send Parasha to tell her I wasn't in. The visitor was about to get down to business and communicate her piece of news when she was interrupted by an exclamation from the lady delightful in every respect. "How charming! What a gay pattern!" she cried, looking at the pleasant lady's dress. "Yes, isn't it gay? But you know, Praskovya Fedorovna thinks it would be nicer if the checks were smaller and the spots were pale blue, rather than brown." Her sister received a length of material you can't imagine how charming it is. Just try to imagine. Exquisitely fine stripes, as fine as is humanly imaginable. A light blue background, and between the stripes, alternate spots and sprigs, absolutely unique. I can say positively, there hasn't been anything like it before. But, my dear, doesn't it sound rather gaudy? Oh, no, it's not in the least gaudy. I'm afraid it sounds rather loud. We must note here that the Lady Delightful in every respect was something of a materialist and had a tendency to doubt and to question. But the Simply Pleasant lady explained that it wasn't really loud, and then exclaimed, "Oh yes, I've news for you. Flounces are definitely out of fashion." Out of fashion? Now they seem to be going in for little festoons. I don't think much of festoons. It's little festoons everywhere. On the collar, on the sleeves, on the shoulders, below. Festoons everywhere. I'm not at all pleased with the idea of festoons everywhere. But they're incredibly charming, my dear. Simply extraordinary. They sew 2 seams, wide slits, and on top. But what will really flabbergast you, what will really make you really exclaim? Well, prepare yourself. Imagine the bodice has become even longer and comes to a point in the front, and the front whalebone protrudes quite beyond bounds. Now, the skirt is gathered all around, like in the days of the old farthingale, and then there's a little padding behind, to turn you into a real belle femme. Well, really, the Lady Delightful in every respect said, setting her head at a dignified angle. But really, as you say, that's how it is, the pleasant lady said. You can suit yourself, but I absolutely refuse to go along with such fads. Well, I myself, when I think sometimes how far fashions will go, it's unthinkable. The other day I persuaded my sister to let me have a pattern, just for fun, and my Melanie is starting on a dress. "So you do have the pattern?" the Lady Delightful in every respect exclaimed with discernible emotion. "Of course, my sister brought it back with her from her trip." "Please, darling, couldn't you let me have it? Please, please? In the name of everything, dear." "I'm awfully sorry, but I've already promised it to Praskovya Fedorovna. But if you like, you can have it when she's finished with it." "Well, who'd want to appear in a dress Praskovya had already been seen wearing? I must say I find it rather disconcerting that you'd give priority to strangers over your close friends." "But she's my cousin." "What sort of a cousin is she?" "And she's only related to you through your husband at that." No, I won't even listen. It seems as though you are deliberately trying to insult me. Unless my company bores you and you intend to break off with me altogether. The poor pleasant lady didn't know what to do. She realized she had blundered between 2 deadly firing lines. Why had she gone on like that? She was ready to stick her stupid tongue full of pins. "Well, and how is your beau getting along?" the lady delightful in every respect asked, interrupting her gloomy thoughts. "Good heavens! How can I sit here without having told you? A good thing you reminded me. You know why I came here, actually?" The visiting lady was breathless with excitement. Her words, scrambling and pushing one another, were like released hawks, eager to pounce on their prey, and one would have had to have been as inhuman as her bosom companion to stop her. "Don't start eulogizing and praising him," she said with rather unaccountable animation, "because I'll say now, and I'll repeat it to his face, he's no good. You hear? No good, no good, no good." "But just let me tell you." I know. They've spread rumors that he's nice, but he isn't. And as I say, he's no good at all. You just look at his nose. What a repulsive sight. But wait a moment. Let me tell you something, dear. Give me a chance to tell you. It's really quite a story," the visiting lady said despairingly, in beseeching tones. It must be noted that the two ladies' conversation was sprinkled with many foreign words and, at times, entire French phrases. But despite my humble gratitude for the relief the French language brings to the Russian, despite my admiration for the praiseworthy custom our high society has of using that language at all hours of the day, obviously motivated by a profound love of our motherland, I still wouldn't think of introducing sentences of a foreign language into this piece of Russian writing. Thus we continue in Russian. "And what's your story about?" "Oh, my dear, I wish you could picture the situation I found myself in. No, just try to imagine. This morning, the deacon's wife, Father Cyril's wife, pays me a call. And guess what she has to tell me about the newcomer, such a quiet, respectable gentleman?" "What? Has he tried to seduce the deacon's wife?" "Nothing in comparison. Just listen. She says Mrs. Korobotchka, the landowner, came to see her, all pale and scared, and told her, no, listen, it's like some novel. In the middle of the night, she says to the deacon's wife, when everyone in the house was asleep, there was the most appalling banging on the gate imaginable, and someone was shouting, 'Open the gate or I'll break in.' What do you say to that? What do you think of our charmer now?" "This Mrs. Korobotchka, is she young and attractive?" "Oh, no, she's an old hag." "Well, how charming. So he goes in for old hags now. I really don't think much of our acquaintance's taste. What a hero they've found to fall head over heels in love with. No, dear, it isn't at all what you think. Just try to picture this. He breaks in, armed to the teeth like some Rinaldo Rinaldi, and says to Mother Korobotchka, 'Sell me all your deceased souls.' Well, Mother Korobotchka answers him quite sensibly that she can't sell them just because they're deceased. 'No,' he says to her. 'They aren't that,' he says. 'That is my business, to know whether they are or not.' And he begins to shout and raise a commotion. The whole village came running. The children started to cry. Everyone was shouting at once. No one understood anything. A horror, as you can imagine. A real horror. My dear, you've no idea how upset I was hearing it all. Even my maid Masha couldn't stand it and said to me, 'Please, ma'am, do look in the mirror. You're so pale.' But I told her I couldn't waste time examining myself in mirrors. I had to rush out and tell you everything. And I ordered my coachman, Andre, to harness the carriage. And when he asked me, 'Where to, ma'am?' I was so excited I couldn't utter a word and just kept staring at him like an idiot. I'm sure he thought I'd gone out of my mind. Just imagine, my dear, how much worry all this has caused me. It's really quite odd," the lady delightful in every respect said. "What on earth could those dead souls mean? I must admit I don't understand at all. This is the second time I've heard talk of dead souls." "Yes. Though my husband says Nozdrov was lying, there must be something to it. But just imagine, my dear, how I felt when I heard. I, Mother Korobotchka said, don't know what to do now. He, she said, forced me to sign some fake document and threw 15 rubles in bills on the table. I am, she said, a defenseless widow and understand nothing about these things. What a thing to happen, don't you think, my dear? But I wish you knew what I've been through worrying about it." "Well, you may think what you wish, but I think it's not just dead souls. There's something else behind all this. So do I, the visitor said, surprised herself and at once felt very curious about what it might be. So in a controlled voice she asked, "And what do you suppose it is? What do you think?" "Me? What do I think? I admit I'm completely stunned. Still, I'd like to hear your opinion on the matter." The pleasant lady didn't know what to say. She knew how to get upset, but was quite incapable of formulating an intelligent supposition. For this she was forced, more than any of the others, to depend on the advice of intimate friends. "Now listen to me. I'll tell you what those dead souls mean," said the lady, delightful in every respect, and her guest immediately became all attention. Her ears pricked up, and she became so light that her body hardly touched her seat, despite her quite imposing weight. In fact, she seemed to become lighter than down and seemed almost to rise and float in the air. In a way, she resembled a Russian country squire, a dog lover and hunter, who, riding up to a wood into which a hare driven by the beaters is about to leap, suddenly turns, horse, riding crop and all, into gunpowder, ready at any moment to ignite. The squire's eyes scour the hazy air, and he pounces on his prey and kills it, despite the drifting snow blowing silvery stars into his lips, mustache, eyes, eyebrows, and beaver cap. "Dead souls," the lady, delightful in every respect, said. "What? What about them?" the visitor asked excitedly. "Dead souls! For heaven's sake, go on." "It's just a ruse. What he's really after is the governor's daughter." This conclusion was quite unexpected, quite uncanny. Hearing it, the pleasant lady turned pale. She was petrified. She was really quite worried. Good heavens, she cried, throwing up her arms. "That's really something I'd never have guessed." "Well, I must admit for my part, as soon as you spoke, I already had a fairly accurate idea of what it was all about," the lady, delightful in every respect, declared. "Trust those boarding school girls. Innocents." "Who's talking about innocence? I've heard her say things that I wouldn't care to repeat. You know, my dear, it just tears my heart to pieces when I realize how far this lack of moral standards has gone." "And still the men are crazy about her. Although I must admit I can't see anything in her myself." "She's unbearably affected," the lady, delightful in every respect, said. "Oh, yes, she thinks she's something of a statue," the pleasant lady chipped in. If only she had some expression on her face. "Oh, she's thoroughly affected, incredibly affected. I don't know where she gets all her mannerisms, but I don't believe I've ever seen a woman with so much pretense. Always so coy." "My dear, she's as lifeless as a statue. She's as colorless as death. You can't say that, my dear. She uses rouge shamelessly." "How can you say that? She looks like chalk to me." "Yes, chalk." "Listen," the lady, delightful in every respect, said. "I sat next to her, and I can tell you that there was about an inch of rouge plastered all over her face, and it chipped off in bits like plaster off a wall. She must have got the habit from her mother, who's quite a coquette in her own right, although I'm sure the daughter will outdo her yet." "Wait a moment, listen to me," the pleasant lady said. "I'm ready to take any oath you please. Lose my husband and children this very moment, all my earthly possessions, whatever you wish, if she uses the tiniest bit of rouge of any kind. How can you say such a thing?" the lady, delightful in every respect, cried, horrified, raising her arms to heaven. "You're really a strange person, my dear. I really fail to understand you," said the pleasant lady, also throwing her arms up to heaven. It is not really so surprising that the ladies failed to agree on what they'd seen at almost the same moment. The world is full of things which, viewed by one lady, are described as white, while, viewed by another, they turn out to be as red as cranberries. I can prove to you she's pale, the pleasant lady went on. I remember clearly because I was sitting next to Manilov, and I even remarked to him, "Look how pale she is." Really, one has to be as helpless as our menfolk to admire her. And talk of our charmer. He struck me then as incredibly repulsive. You have no idea, dear, how repulsive he seemed to me at that moment. Nevertheless, I know of some ladies who were rather sweet on him. You mean me? You can't say such a thing about me. Never, never, never. I wasn't talking about you. Listening to you, one would think there was no one else in the world but you. Never, I assure you. I should tell you, for your information, that I know myself extremely well. What you said may perhaps be true of certain other ladies who try to create the impression that they are quite inaccessible. Now, do forgive me and listen to me, the lady, delightful in every respect, replied. You may rest assured that I have never in my life indulged in such scandalous behavior. Someone else, perhaps, but for me, never, let me tell you. But why do you take offense at what I said? You know there were those who raced to grab the chair by the door simply to be next to him. An explosion seemed inevitable, but surprisingly enough, both ladies suddenly calmed down and nothing happened. The hostess had remembered that the new dress pattern was still in the possession of her guest, while the guest felt that she had yet to hear further details of her good friend's discovery about the dead souls. Thus, peace descended very quickly. Besides, the two ladies hadn't any particular desire to offend, and generally speaking, there was nothing notably vicious in their natures. Their urge to make catty remarks rose spontaneously as they talked. It was simply that when the occasion seemed opportune, neither could resist taking a dig at the other, thinking, "Now here's something for you, take that." There are all sorts of impulses hidden in the hearts of ladies and gentlemen alike. There's one thing I can't make out, the pleasant lady said. How could this person, Chichikov, just a stranger passing through our town, dare to attempt such a brazen thing, and without accomplices? And what makes you think he hasn't any? Who do you guess is helping him then? Nozdrov, to start with. Nozdrov. Is it possible? And what do you think would stop that one? You know very well he'd sell his own father, or rather, lose him at cards. Good gracious, what exciting news I've learned from you. Who would have ever thought that Nozdrov was mixed up in it too? Well, I've thought so all along. When one stops to think about the things that can happen, who would have believed, when he arrived here, that Chichikov would cause such a commotion in our little group? Oh, if you only knew how much worry all this has given me. If it hadn't been for your kindness and friendship, I really felt it was the end of everything. My Masha, she saw how pale I was. Madam, dear madam, you're as pale as a corpse, she said to me. Masha, I said to her, I have more important things to do now than to worry about it. So that's how it is. So Nozdrov's involved too, if you please. The pleasant lady longed to hear more about the abduction of the governor's daughter, that is, at what time it was to take place and such things, but she was much too avid. The lady, delightful in every respect, pretended not to know. She was incapable of lying, and if she sometimes assumed things, her assumption was always based on inner conviction. But once that inner conviction arrived, she could well defend it. Just let some experienced lawyer, a man famous for changing other people's opinions, just let him try to sway her, and he'd discover the strength of her beliefs. It's no wonder that the two ladies became convinced of something that at first had been nothing but an assumption. We intelligent people, as we like to refer to ourselves, act in the same way. Just consider the reasoning of our scholars. First, Our savant creeps up and starts very shyly with a hesitant question. Wasn't it because of this? Didn't this country get her name because of such and such a particular spot? Or, doesn't such and such a document belong to a different, later period? Or, shouldn't the name of such and such a people include this particular national group? Then he proceeds to quote some old document, and soon he finds in it a hint of a confirmation, or only what he interprets as a hint. And now he sets out at a trot and begins to argue with the long-deceased authors quite unceremoniously, asking questions, answering them himself, having completely forgotten that he started out with nothing but a humble assumption. He now believes that he sees that everything is clear to him, and he brings his reasoning to a conclusion with the words, "That's how it was. The people in question are the such and such. The subject must be approached in such and such fashion." Then he expounds the newly found truth from a university chair, and it spreads around the world, gathering followers and disciples. While the two ladies were solving this entangled affair so cleverly and so successfully, in came the public prosecutor, frozen face, bushy eyebrows, blinking eyes and all. Interrupting one another, the ladies hurriedly gave him the news, the purchase of dead souls and the plot to abduct the governor's daughter, all of which befuddled him so much that, although he remained rooted to the spot, batting his left eye, flicking at his beard with his handkerchief to remove bits of tobacco, he still couldn't manage to make any sense out of it all. The ladies left him thus, each going her own way to arouse the town. It took them just over an hour to do so. The entire town was definitely in a turmoil by then. Everything was astir, although no one knew what was going on. The ladies succeeded in confusing matters so thoroughly that the population in general, and the government employees in particular, were momentarily speechless. At first they felt like the schoolboy whose nose is filled with snuff by his comrades while he is asleep. Breathing in deeply with a sleeper's zest, he awakens, jumps up, looks around stupidly, his eyes popping, and can't figure out where he is or what's happened. And only afterward does he begin to make out the walls, lighted by the slanting rays of the sun, his laughing comrades hiding in corners, the new morning peeping in at the window, the awakened forest ringing with the twittering of birds, the shining river flowing between its slender reeds, the children in the water urging other children to join them. And only after that will he become aware of the nose full of snuff. Such indeed was the state of the town's inhabitants and of its government officials during the first minute. They stood gaping, eyes popping out of their heads. Dead souls, the governor's daughter, Chichikov, everything got lumped together and formed a queer mixture inside their heads. Then, after the first shock, they started to sort it all out, to differentiate, to demand an explanation, since the whole business didn't seem to make any sense. What was this story of dead souls all about? What rational motive could there be for a man to go around buying up dead souls? Where could such a fool be found? What sort of money would he use to buy such a commodity? What could his purpose be in buying dead souls, and what use could he make of them? What had the governor's daughter to do with it all? If Chichikov really intended to abduct her, why did he need dead souls for that purpose? And conversely, if he were after dead souls, why should he want to carry off the governor's daughter? How had such poppycock been spread all over the town? What was the town coming to if the moment you had turned your back, you found such idiotic stories circulating? If they had at least made some sense? But then the very fact that they were being spread indicated that there was a reason. But what reason could there be for buying dead souls? None, obviously. It was simply nonsense. Like soft-boiled boots, sealing wax, and sparrows, or any fool thing.